Hey everybody, welcome to What's Up Wednesday. This week, I'm going to try to do something really complicated. I'm going to try to kind of contrast and compare the ideas of behavior-based safety and human operational performance. Now, this is a big can of worms to unpackage, but I'm going to do my best. And keep in mind that this is definitely, I would say, a Cliff Notes version of a comparison of the two. But when I look back on my career and getting my degree back in the early 90s, there was talk about behavior-based safety. There was talk about beginning to focus more on our leading indicators and less on lagging indicators, which are things that have already happened, such as first aid, recordable injuries, time loss injuries, fatalities, et cetera. And I think, the shift was a good shift, but the whole idea of behavior-based safety was kind of touched upon early on in the 1930s with Herbert Heinrich and his work. And then it kind of reemerged in the 70s and 80s and became a hot discussion topic. And it has continued ever since then. What I would say is that, some of those concepts are being challenged on a regular basis. And there's some really good videos out there that compare and contrast these two things. But, in a nutshell, behavior-based safety, it primarily focuses on observing and modifying behaviors of individuals to improve safety. Human operational performance kind of takes a broader systems or process-based approach, assuming that people are going to make mistakes. And you need to really focus on building error tolerant systems, improve communication, understand the contextual factors that kind of lead to failure. So HOP is focused on process, and BBS is focused more on individual behaviors, choices, and actions of people. So when we look at the two, they interrelate to one another, but they're also very different in some ways. So let's kind of take a look first at, kind of four things: the focus of each, the goal of each, kind of the method they use, and then an example so we can kind of compare them. So we'll start with behavior-based safety. Now, as I mentioned, behavior-based safety tends to focus on individuals, workers, actions, and behaviors, on the person, on the employee, on the worker. The goal of BBS is to identify critical unsafe behaviors and reinforce the importance of safe behaviors through observation, feedback, and positive recognition. Now, positive recognition is a way to motivate people to behave a certain way to avoid bad behaviors or at-risk behaviors. The method generally used for behavior-based safety approach is, again, observations and scorecards to influence worker actions. Sometimes this can lead to overemphasizing worker activities instead of system failures. And we can't blame an employee always for a failure, if you want to call it that, results in an accident or injury. So a good example would be a supervisor observing an employee's use of a tool and providing feedback on how they could maybe more safely use that tool or properly use that tool. So now let's shift to HOP, human operational performance. Human operational performance, as I mentioned, it tends to focus on the systemic factors, organizational culture, and kind of the context in which work and activities are performed. The goal of HOP is to create systems that are more forgiving and error tolerant, reducing the likelihood and severity of negative outcomes by building in defenses. So we're considering that humans are going to make mistakes, but we want to build processes and systems that can absorb a level of mistake without a significant failure, injury, incident, whatever it might be. So the method generally used with HOP is that we have to assume that there will be mistakes and that they're going to be inevitable, and we need to seek to understand the reason behind them, kind of shifting from that blame or kind of root causal approach to blaming it on the culture, so that we can kind of emphasize the importance of learning, communication, and the overall improvement of the system. And I think that's a really big deal, because obviously identifying root cause sometimes results in blame, and blame has a very negative connotation that often doesn't result in positive uh, kind of movement forward, if you want to call it that. So a good example of HOP would be conducting an investigation to reveal kind of system design or workflow to encourage that might encourage shortcuts. And that's what an investigation would do. HOP is going to focus on redesigning a system to prevent errors and allow for successful interventions. So an investigation is going to determine the failure points. HOP is going to fix those failure points or address those failure points so that the system is built not to fail in the future. So some of the big differences between behavior-based safety and HOP are, one would be the primary driver. BBS is very, again, worker-centric, whereas HOP is very system and process centric. And I think that is the biggest differentiator between the two. I think another big differentiator is kind of their approach to error in general. BBS tends to focus on unsafe behaviors, whereas HOP is kind of looking at and considering that errors are going to happen, but we want to try to seek to prevent them from leading to significant loss or significant error. And then another thing would be a difference would be in accountability. BBS sometimes, again, leads to that blame culture by focusing on individual actions and behaviors, whereas HOP is promoting the organizational accountability to create safe systems. So, again, those are kind of the big differences. And the big question is, can these two work together? And at the beginning, I said, yeah, they're interrelated to an extent and they can work together. And I think that there are aspects of both that make a lot of sense within a company and building a safety culture. So, one thing I would say is they can be very complementary. HOP can provide a deeper understanding of systemic issues that contribute to safety incidents, while behavior-based safety can provide valuable data from, through observation of behaviors that might indicate underlying systemic problems. So there's an interrelationship there. And integrating the insights from both of these things can lead to more comprehensive root cause analysis and the development ultimately of effective solutions that prevent recurrence of things that go wrong, accidents that occur, incidents, near misses, unsafe behaviors. Again, an unsafe behavior is an accident that didn't happen, and we need to look at it that way. So when you get into this topic, when people talk about BBS and they talk about HOP, it can be very confusing, but hopefully that little summary is helpful. And if you want more information on it, go to YouTube and look it up. There's some really great debates out there, and there's some really good commentary on debates that have occurred on stage at some of the biggest conferences in the country. So again, hope that's helpful, and we'll see you with a new topic next Wednesday.